Hey guys, welcome to the weekly movie recommendations with Sankit. So, for tonight's episode, I have invited a very special guest to this show whose name is Matthew Cody Lang. So, Matthew is a very dear friend of mine and a fellow cinephile. So, he watches films from every country. So, he watches from films from film festivals, and he is a very indie film lover. So you can check it out. His top films from 2020 into his letterbox page, which I have attached in the description. So for tonight's episode, he has recommended two films which I personally haven't heard it before. So over to you, Mattav, for the two amazing film recommendations.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew Cody Lang. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I want to thank Sanket for letting me come on here and try to talk about some movies that I really enjoy. I'm not great at public speaking, so hold on there with me. But the first film I would love to talk about right now would be Heavenly Creatures. There's a thing in the back if you can see, if it doesn't get blocked. It is a Peter Jackson film who is famous for directing the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and stars stars Kate Winslet and Melanie Linsky in their debut roles. Kate Winslet, of course, went on to do Titanic, which everybody knows, and Little Children, and The Reader. And Melanie Linsky went on and did a bunch of indie projects. She was also in like Two and a Half Men, if you watch that show. I'm not a sitcom person, but maybe you like it, so there you go. She's in that. But this one is my favorite of his, actually. It takes place in New Zealand, and it is about a certain crime that happened in 1954 with two young teenagers, Juliet Hume and Pauline Parker, in Christchurch, New Zealand. It follows them as they discover, different things about their possible sexuality, and they follow their giant imagination that takes them to this made up place called the Fourth World, where when you die, a bunch of artists, famous artists, people that they obsess over, including Mario Lanza, and they pretend to go to this world and they create these different stories. And in the film, Peter Jackson has them enter this world in a very fantastic way, with a lot of different animation and exciting costumes where they're clay figures even come alive. They start dancing with them, and then their relationship starts to get a bit intense, and they begin to want to spend every single moment with each other, not knowing exactly possibly how intense their relationship is going. They reenact the characters they've created in their head. They reenact them having sex with each other, and but more of a playful kid way. The movie kind of sets it up as if they are complete lesbians, but I think it's more of on the spectrum of sexuality, and them exploring that along with different other possibilities in their life of what they can do with their future. And it's just a trying time for them, but it's also a very upsetting time for gay people in general, because homosexuality was seen as a mental illness during that time. So their parents struggle with it and want to keep them apart because it becomes a bit more intense to their liking, or for their liking. And it ends up in a very upsetting crime, which you will see. I don't want to give it away, but at the very beginning of the film, there is this great little montage that has to deal with Christchurch, the city, and and it just kind of shows this very old-fashioned video montage of all the fun things around the city, and then breaks into the two of them running for their lives, screaming, covered in blood, and that's the beginning of the film. So you're here we go. So then it goes back to them and how they met, and following through to what happens to them later on. And even when you've finished with the film, I highly recommend looking up what actually happened, because there's a lot more involved. And the two young teens, they grew up, they're still alive, and they one of them is a famous author. I will leave that to you to go and look that up. Unfortunately, it's hard to find this streaming anywhere. Hopefully you can find it somewhere online in some other way. I had to buy it, so which is totally fine, because I love this movie so much. I've loved it since I was a teenager. And also make sure you watch the uncut version if you can, solely because the very last scene has a moment that was cut from the regular one, I guess, but it's just one shot that happens over the sound of her screaming, and I think it gives you that final punch in the face. Very necessary, at least for me. But definitely check it out. I think it's like the most exciting Peter Jackson film, because it's super playful, even though it's dealing with a very difficult and horrific subject matter. But definitely check it out if you can. And the second film or film series I'd like to talk about is called Dau, D-A-U. It is about Lev Landau, a Soviet scientist, Nobel Prize winning scientist in Soviet Russia. This film, these are actually 9 films that have been released right now. They take place from 1938 to 1968, all over that time period in Moscow. But it was filmed in the Ukraine. Okay, so this is a very exciting, intense, I know I use that a lot, but my God. It is I would say if you've seen Synecdoche, New York, or The Truman Show, it's like a real live version of that. So this director, Ilya Kurzanovsky, I'm probably butchering that, but he and a few other directors, including Yekaterina Ortel, probably butchering that as well, they have created this giant institute and had all these different people come and live there for a few years, from 2008 to 2011, and they shot over 700 hours of footage of just people living their lives mostly, and a lot of them lived there like 24/7, 7 days a week in character. So it's this wild thing that I couldn't even imagine actually happening, and there was a bunch of controversy while it was happening. No one really knew what was going on. People were stuck there. They couldn't say things, and a lot of the people weren't really actors. They were, like scientists and like cooks, waiters, teachers, all kinds of different people, and they went there and just lived their lives, but in character, like taking place in 1938 to 1968 Soviet Russia. So a lot of things went down, but it was all, consenting adults, and if you weren't a fan of it, you could leave, and people did. But the things that went down there were still very, very controversial. In the movies, there are several that follow different characters. So though Lev Landau is the main person who's like the main scientist who kind of runs the institute of all the different experiments that go on there, including those like with animals and people, babies. There's all different cultures and different approaches to all these different philosophical questions, scientific questions, religious questions. It goes deep into all of that, but mostly it's a social experiment on film, like a live action role play. It's fucking crazy. The first film is Degeneration, which is actually towards the latter half of the time there, around like 1968, and follows, I think it's the best place. You can really start anywhere in the film series and dive in any film. There's no order, but I went in release order, which starts with Degeneration and Dau Natasha. Degeneration is in the latter half. It's about 6 hours long, but it's split up into chapters, and it's, if you enjoy, watching people just kind of in their lived-in experience, it's very exciting, especially to see how the dynamics are between certain people, because they all live together, they're all pushed into a place, and once there are people that come in, real criminals that they brought into the shooting, and they play these super soldiers in a way that are being made into these like killing machines that lack like any kind of empathy, any awareness of other people being people, and that begins to make things worse. What is really exciting, I think, is that in certain films you'll see, in some of the films you will see like the camera people like in the reflection or just like their shadows or anything, and it can be distracting sometimes, but I also feel like they are part of the experiment. So even if the film is supposed to take place in that time, I think the looming idea of this giant project is still there. So you are watching these people, these characters, but you're also watching the people play these characters, and to see the intense things that they get to go through. And a lot of people can't stomach it, which is completely understandable. I mean, you do see live like animal testing, which I, was not like happy about, but I also can't really complain because I eat meat, and not that I'm like happy about it, but yay, conditioning. And then there's also unsimulated sex and some things that like there are more like disturbing moments that have to do with like sexual things, and it's very uncomfortable. So because these people are also, living their lives and trying to do this, but they push them to very distinct and horrifying places as if they were actually living in that time. So it's it definitely brings up a lot of exciting questions about art and where the limits are and how far people are willing to go, how far people should go, what makes this art, what, how far can you go. It's a lot to deal with, but the films in general also have to deal with the extensive marriage and relationships and religious influences, that over scientific influences and all this stuff basically relating to that time. So it's a lot. It is incredibly exciting if you let yourself just watch this experiment kind of play out. But a lot of people can't, and it's understandable. But I highly recommend at least checking out Degeneration to see, the grand kind of idea behind it all, especially with all the different people involved. And it covers most of the people, except some of the other films go to the past a little bit, and you see different relationships develop and where they've gone or if they've even made it that far. So definitely check that out if you can. And I'm glad I got to come on here and talk about stuff real quick. Also, you can watch DAO at dau.com. It is their website. They're constantly bringing new material out there. Right now they have 9 films for you to rent if you would like to rent them and watch them, with more coming along the way, and even like dance stuff, art, what else? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff they're kind of pulling out. It was a whole bunch of different ideas, and they're just like, we're going to do it all. And they did. So it's starting to come out. Next year, there will be a few more films that come out, which I cannot wait. So thank you, Sanket, for bringing me on here. The weekly movie recommendations is, I think, super exciting. And you getting all these people to come together and talk about world cinema is just incredible. I think there should be more of it. And I'm glad that you bring everybody along. Make sure you like and subscribe and share. Sorry, I have friends coming over. Thank you so much, and Puma! I appreciate everything. Thank you.